Benjamin Parker, 65 years old, his face a roadmap of exhaustion, his eyes hollowed out by sleepless nights and cheap whiskey. He sat hunched on a ripped leather stool in the back room of a clandestine gambling house, a nearly empty bottle in one hand and a pair of dice in the other. The dice felt heavier than hope. As they tumbled across the worn felt of the table, the world seemed to hold its breath. For a single electric second, a jolt of pure, unadulterated hope shot through him. This was it. This was the one. But the numbers that settled under the dim, smoky light were wrong. Again. For the 8th time that night. The air in the room was suffocating, thick with stale smoke and the palpable tension of desperate men. A film of sweat coated Benjamin's skin, not from the heat, but from the cold, creeping anxiety that had become his constant companion. He was an addict. After the cancer had cruelly stolen his wife, Clarice, Benjamin had found himself adrift in a sea of grief and debt. The hospital bills he couldn't pay, the mortgage, the utilities. The gambling had started as a fantasy, a quick fix. Just one lucky roll, and he could change everything. Pay off his debts, secure the house, fund Lily's future. That's what he told himself. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder. It was firm, dry, and unwelcome. Benjamin turned slowly, his heart sinking. It was one of Royce's men, a mountain of a man, his broad arms straining against the seams of a cheap suit. "Come on, Parker." The man's voice was a low growl that allowed no room for refusal. "Royce wants a word." The chatter at the table died instantly. Benjamin knew he had no choice. "Benjamin!" Royce's voice boomed across the private office. His smile, which revealed a single gold tooth, was wide and predatory, as if greeting an old friend. He was a large man, his face flushed red, his bald head gleaming under the single overhead lamp. "Royce, how are you?" Benjamin managed, his own voice tight with apprehension. "I'm great, Ben. Better now that I know you owe me a favor," Royce replied, the false smile dropping away, revealing the shark beneath. "Royce, I know I owe you some money, but I'll pay you. Some money." Royce let out a dry, sarcastic laugh that grated on Benjamin's nerves. "My friend, you owe me $800,000. I don't think that qualifies as some." Benjamin swallowed hard, the number a death sentence. "But look here, Ben." Royce's tone shifted again, becoming almost sickeningly sweet. "I'm a merciful man, and you have something that I'm interested in." A chill, colder than any winter night, snaked down Benjamin's spine. He could see the devil dancing in the man's eyes. "What could I possibly have that interests you, Royce? My house? We can work something out." "Don't play the fool, Benjamin." Royce slammed a meaty fist on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The mask was gone. The fake sympathy had vanished, replaced by a rabid, possessive anger. He quickly composed himself, settling back into his chair with a pretense of elegance. "I want your daughter, Benjamin." Benjamin's heart felt like it stopped. His vision tunneled for a second, as if he'd been struck. Lily? This monster wanted his Lily? His little girl who, despite being 23, was still the light of his life? "Royce, I don't think I understand. My daughter? She's a good girl. She works 2 jobs to help me with the bills. She's never been in any trouble. She's not like the girls who work here," Benjamin stammered, unable to stop the tears that now streamed down his weathered face. "Stop your crying, man. You look even more pathetic," Royce said, with a look of disgust. "This is how the world works, Ben. Did you think you could come in here night after night, drink my whiskey, play with my money, and there would be no consequences?" He leaned forward, his eyes burning with a repulsive malice. "I want Lily for my own interests. I don't care that she's not like the girls who work for me. That's precisely what makes me want her so badly." The implication was vile, unmistakable. Benjamin, I'm giving you an opportunity, a gift. You bring me your Lily next Thursday, willingly, and I will forgive everything you owe me." He paused, letting the horror sink in. "Or, you'd better find a way to come up with $800,000. Royce finished with a low, diabolical laugh. Benjamin stumbled out of the office, his heart hammering against his ribs, his mind reeling. He had expected Royce to hurt him. Maybe, deep down, he had even wanted it as punishment for his failures. But his daughter, his Lily, he couldn't bear it. Then, like a flash of lightning in the storm of his despair, an idea struck him. It was insane. It was a long shot. But it was the only way. The Langford estate rose from the manicured lawns of Suickley Heights, like a fortress against the brewing storm outside. Benjamin had been a driver for this family for over 20 years, a silent fixture in the background of their opulent lives. He stood at the service entrance, soaked from the rain, his desperation a palpable aura. "I need to see Dr. Langford," he said to Maria, the head housekeeper, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, Maria. It's a matter of life and death." She led him through marble halls lined with the oil-painted portraits of Langford ancestors, their severe, aristocratic faces seeming to judge him as he passed. The study smelled of old leather and expensive bourbon, and behind the massive mahogany desk sat Daniel Langford, 28 years old, devastatingly handsome, and colder than the storm raging outside. He was the grandson of Edward Langford, the man Benjamin had served so loyally for so many years. Daniel didn't look up from the medical journals spread before him. "You have 2 minutes, Benjamin. Make them count." "Dr. Langford," Benjamin began, his voice cracking under the weight of his shame. "I know this is insane, but some of the old staff mentioned you were looking for a wife." Now Daniel looked up, one dark eyebrow arched in aristocratic disdain. "Are you offering your services as a matchmaker? Because your track record with life choices isn't exactly stellar." The words cut deep, but Benjamin pressed on, fueled by a desperation that eclipsed any humiliation. "Please just hear me out. I'm drowning, Dr. Langford. After Clarice died, I lost my way. The grief was eating me alive, and I thought the gambling would numb the pain. It didn't. It just made everything worse." Daniel leaned back in his leather chair, his long fingers steepling in front of him. His gaze was analytical, assessing. "And now you want me to bail you out? How much?" $800,000, Benjamin whispered, the number falling between them like a death sentence. "That's a substantial debt for a man with no assets," Daniel observed coolly. "What makes you think I would invest in such a high-risk proposition?" Tears welled in Benjamin's eyes, hot and shameful. "Because I'm not asking you to invest in me. I'm asking you to invest in my daughter." The words poured out of him now, a torrent of love and fear. "Lily she's all the good I have left. She's beautiful, yes, but she's so much more than that. She's brilliant. She loves literature. She sees the world with eyes that haven't been corrupted by money or status." For the first time, Daniel's expression shifted. A flicker of something, curiosity perhaps, danced in his cold eyes. "Go on." "She's pure in a way this world doesn't deserve," Benjamin pleaded, his voice breaking completely. "She works at Miller's Diner, saving every penny for her future, and on weekends she volunteers, teaching kids who can't afford tutors. She asks for nothing and gives everything." He looked at the powerful young man before him, his last hope. "She is the only good thing I have ever done, and now she's going to pay for my sins if I can't stop it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his sharp gaze studying the broken man before him. $800,000 was pocket change to him. But why would he tie himself to a waitress from the wrong side of town? On the other hand, every woman in his own social circle bored him to tears, vain, vapid creatures more interested in his bank account than his mind. This girl, she sounded different. Interesting. "I'll need to meet her first," Daniel said finally, his voice crisp and decisive. "Consider it a courtesy. For your years of loyalty to my grandfather." Miller's diner buzzed with the usual lunchtime crowd, a symphony of clattering plates, sizzling bacon, and cheerful chatter. To Daniel, seated in a worn vinyl booth, it felt like another planet. He had swapped his usual Armani suit for simple trousers and a button-down shirt in a futile attempt to blend in. Propped prominently on his table was a thick, worn copy of The Brothers Karamazov. It was his test. She appeared like something out of a dream, moving between the crowded tables with an unconscious, fluid grace. Even in the unflattering polyester uniform, Lily Parker was stunning. But it was the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes that truly captured his attention. She approached his table, a small notepad in her hand. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice warm and friendly, a small professional smile on her lips. "Just coffee, thank you," he replied. Her eyes flickered to the book on his table as she jotted down his order. "You have good taste in literature," she commented, the smile becoming more genuine. "Dostoevsky," he said simply. "Are you a fan?" She looked up, surprised by the direct question. "I am. But it's not exactly light reading for a coffee break, is it?" A playful glint appeared in her eyes. "Is he your favorite?" "Not exactly. But he's a good filter." He took a sip of the coffee she had just poured. "Separates those who read out of habit from those who read out of hunger." She tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "And what are you hungry for?" Daniel held her gaze for a second longer than was necessary. "To understand people. To understand myself, perhaps." Lily leaned her notepad against her hip, the professional facade momentarily forgotten. "So you're one of those who believes all pain needs to be understood?" "No," he said softly, his eyes still locked on hers. "But I think it's dangerous to ignore what it's trying to tell you." A small, knowing smile played on her lips. "You talk like someone who has either suffered a great deal or read far too many books." "Perhaps both," he admitted. She took a breath, as if something in him resonated with a familiar depth in her. "I prefer Notes from Underground," she confessed. "It's more honest. The character knows he's small and petty and broken, and he doesn't try to pretend otherwise. That's rare these days." Daniel raised an eyebrow, genuinely impressed. "You've actually read Dostoevsky." "More than I probably should have," she said with a self-deprecating shrug. "I work here during the day, but I study literature at night. It's my way of staying sane." He watched her more closely now. Not just beautiful, not just kind, but alive and intelligent, and carrying a quiet sadness that she wore like a well-loved coat. "That sounds like someone who's trying to escape," he observed. "Not escape," she corrected gently. "Survive." She straightened up, her professional posture returning. "Can I get you anything to eat?" "No, just the coffee." He paused, a decision solidifying in his mind. And perhaps another conversation. This could be interesting. Perhaps Benjamin wasn't so crazy after all. She looked at him, a mixture of amusement and suspicion in her eyes. "Lily!" The harsh voice of her manager, a balding man named Richard, cut through their conversation like a blade. "Get back to work. You're not paid to chat." "I'm sorry," Lily said, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment as she turned away from Daniel. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," Daniel said quietly, his voice firm enough for only her to hear. It was illuminating. As she moved away to take another order, Daniel watched her, observing the easy grace and genuine warmth she showed to every customer. He finished his coffee slowly, his decision made. When he reached his car, his phone was already in his hand. "Benjamin, I've met your daughter. We have a deal." Benjamin stood nervously in his small living room, repeatedly adjusting a tie that felt like it was choking him. The house was humble but tidy, filled with the ghosts of a happier past he was desperately trying to salvage. The doorbell chimed, a sound that seemed to echo with the finality of a judge's gavel. He opened the door to find Daniel Langford standing on his porch, an imposing figure against the gray afternoon sky. He was as devastatingly handsome and as cold as Benjamin remembered. Lily came from the kitchen, a cup of tea in her hand, and stopped short. "Dad? What is he doing here?" she whispered, her eyes wide with confusion. "How do you know him?" Benjamin stammered, the words catching in his throat. Daniel stepped past him into the room, his presence immediately shrinking the small space. He looked at Lily, his expression unreadable, the warmth and curiosity from the diner completely gone. This was business. "Lily, please, sit down," Benjamin said, his voice trembling. "We need to talk. About what's happened. I've lost everything. I got into debt and I didn't know what else to do. I was threatened and I did something to protect you." "Protect me from what, Dad?" she asked, her heart beginning to pound with a nameless dread. "What are you talking about?" With tears welling in his eyes, Benjamin let the whole sordid story spill out in a single ragged breath. The gambling, the lies, the crushing debt to Royce, and the vile threat against her. "So I went to Dr. Langford," he finished, his voice cracking. "He was looking for a wife, and I made a deal with him. He's going to marry you, Lily. It's the only way to pay the debt." Lily stared at him, her face a mask of horror. The teacup slipped from her numb fingers and shattered on the floor, the sound of violent punctuation to her father's confession. "What?" she breathed, the word a ghost of a sound. You sold me? To him?" Daniel, who had been watching the scene unfold in cold silence, took a step forward. "Benjamin, please give us some privacy," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "I need to speak with your daughter alone." Benjamin, his face ashen, retreated from the room, leaving the two of them alone with the broken pieces of porcelain on the floor. Lily was on the verge of a complete breakdown, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and betrayal. "What kind of man makes a deal like this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Daniel didn't flinch. He bent down, picked up a shard of the broken cup, and looked at her, his eyes devoid of pity. "I require a wife who is intelligent, presentable, and won't embarrass me in the social circles I frequent. You appear to be more than just a pretty face. This marriage will be purely for convenience." He stood up, his voice becoming firmer, laying out the terms as if discussing a medical procedure. "I pay your father's debt. I provide him with a comfortable living arrangement and enroll him in the best psychiatric and addiction program my hospital has to offer. In return, you will act as my wife. You will attend social functions. You will manage my household staff. It's not a large team, merely a housekeeper, 2 maids, a cook, 2 drivers, and a gardener. The house must be kept in impeccable order, as I often entertain important guests." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "My head housekeeper, Maria, insists on my opinion for everything from cocktail menus to curtain fabrics. A man in my position shouldn't be bothered with such trivialities. My household staff needs me to have a wife as much as I do." A hysterical, ironic laugh escaped Lily's lips. "Are you kidding me? The richest doctor in the city needs a Cinderella?" Daniel's expression remained serious. "Call it what you will, Miss Parker. Let's just say you need my help, and I need yours. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." He paused, his gaze dropping for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "And don't worry about physical contact. I have other avenues for that sort of entertainment. I won't touch you." He let the words hang in the air, then added, his voice a low, suggestive whisper, "Unless, of course, you want me to." Lily felt a strange, terrifying mix of revulsion and fascination. What kind of woman would refuse the touch of a man as undeniably attractive as him? The thought was a traitorous whisper in the back of her mind. He can't know that, she thought frantically. A man like him, rich, powerful, used to getting what he wants. If he senses any attraction, he'll know he has me. He'll own me completely. I accept, she said, her voice loud and defiant, a shield against her own treacherous thoughts. But on one condition. You will not lay a single finger on me. Ever. Daniel was already at the door. He turned back, a slow, sardonic smile spreading across his handsome face. Fine. We have a deal. My lawyer will be here tomorrow morning with the contracts. Have your bags packed by 9. He paused, his eyes raking over her in a way that made her skin prickle. Miss Parker, he said, his voice dripping with irony, I have a feeling you're going to change your mind. About the wedding? She asked, confused. No, he replied, the smirk widening. About letting me touch you. He turned and left. Lily watched him go, her body trembling. What was this feeling? This terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly confusing feeling. The Langford estate was even more imposing in the daylight. A sprawling stone mansion that spoke of generations of untouchable wealth and power. As Daniel's car crunched up the long gravel driveway, Lily pressed her face against the cool glass of the window, trying to process the fact that this was now her home. Overwhelmed? Daniel asked, his voice cool and detached, noticing her expression. Intimidated, she corrected honestly. Maria, the head housekeeper, greeted them at the massive front door. She was a woman in her late 50s, with kind, knowing eyes and silver hair, pulled back in a neat bun. Welcome home, Mrs. Langford, she said warmly, and Lily had to suppress a shiver at the foreign-sounding title. Maria will show you to your quarters, Daniel said brusquely, already checking his phone. I have a surgery in an hour. We'll discuss the household routines tonight at dinner. And just like that, he was gone, leaving Lily standing in the grand foyer with its soaring ceilings and glittering crystal chandelier. Don't you mind him, Maria said gently, her smile reassuring. Dr. Langford isn't much for small talk, but he's a good man deep down. Come, let me show you the house. The tour was overwhelming. 15 bedrooms, a ballroom, and a library that made Lily's heart skip a beat. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined 3 of the 4 walls, filled with leather-bound classics and modern first editions. A reading nook built into a bay window overlooked the sprawling gardens. This is beautiful, Lily breathed, running her fingers reverently over the spines of the books. Dr. Langford is a great reader, Maria said with a fond smile, though he rarely has the time for it these days. Perhaps you'll bring some life back to this room. Lily's room, her wing, as Daniel had called it, was larger than her entire childhood home. The 4-poster bed was draped in silk, and French doors opened onto a private balcony. After Maria left, Lily unpacked her few meager belongings, feeling like an imposter in the luxurious space. She changed into jeans and a simple sweater, the most casual clothes she owned, and retreated back to the library. For the first time since signing those papers, she felt a sense of peace. She pulled a volume of Emily Dickinson from a shelf and curled up in the window seat, losing herself in the poetry until the sun began to set. Finding everything to your satisfaction? Lily jumped, nearly dropping the book. Daniel stood in the doorway, having changed from his surgical scrubs into dark trousers and a crisp white shirt that emphasized his tall, athletic build. The library is incredible, she said, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. I could spend days in here. Feel free. Most of these books haven't been touched in years. He walked into the room, and Lily noticed how his eyes deliberately avoided one particular shelf near the fireplace. Dinner is ready, he announced. Maria made her famous pot roast. The formal dining room could have seated 20. They sat at opposite ends of the massive polished table, the space between them feeling like an ocean. Crystal goblets and heavy silver cutlery gleamed under the light of the chandelier above. Lily looked at Daniel, then at the ridiculous distance between them, and stood up with her plate. What are you doing? Daniel asked, watching as she moved to the chair directly beside him. "Sitting closer," she said simply, settling into the seat next to his. "We're not hosting a state dinner, Daniel." He raised an eyebrow. "According to proper etiquette, your seat should be at the other end of the table. It's not appropriate to simply sit where you please." Lily ignored his lecture on protocol, cutting into her food. "I like human warmth. I'm not going to sit a mile away from you when it's just the two of us." He stared at her for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Then a slow, genuinely fascinated smile spread across his face. Apparently, Lily was not going to be the meek, compliant wife he had anticipated. She was authentic. Later that night, Daniel found her asleep in the library, curled up on the deep leather sofa with an open copy of Wuthering Heights resting on her lap. She looked peaceful, her face soft and unguarded in the dim light. She was wearing a modest white satin nightgown that had somehow become slightly disheveled in her sleep. Daniel couldn't help but notice how graceful she looked, even in slumber. A delicate strap had slipped from her shoulder, and he found his eyes drawn to a small beauty mark on her neck he'd never noticed before. Without thinking, he moved closer, studying the elegant curve of her throat. Almost unconsciously, he found himself leaning in, wanting to catch the subtle vanilla scent of her hair. The fragrance was intoxicating, filling his senses and making his masculine instincts roar to life with an intensity that shocked him. The desire was immediate and overwhelming. He wanted to make love to her right there, to taste that exposed neck, to discover the flavor of her lips, to claim her completely. Realizing his thoughts had strayed into dangerous territory, he pulled back sharply, his heart pounding. This was wrong, wasn't it? He tried to compose himself, fighting to push down the want that had risen so unexpectedly and powerfully. Taking a deep breath, he gently scooped her into his strong arms, careful not to wake her as he carried her toward her room. The book fell softly to the floor, forgotten. Lily stirred as Daniel ascended the grand staircase, her face pressing against his broad chest. The intoxicating scent of his masculine cologne and aftershave filled her senses, and something deep inside her trembled with awareness. Her heart began to race, but she didn't have the courage to show she was awake, so she kept her eyes closed, feigning sleep, while every nerve in her body came alive with his proximity. Daniel laid her gently on her bed, pulling the covers up with a tender care. He was about to leave when he paused in the doorway, some internal battle crossing his features in the moonlight. Silently, he returned to her bedside and pressed a long, soft kiss to the top of her head, his lips lingering against her hair for a moment longer than necessary. He made sure she was properly covered, his fingers briefly brushing her cheek before he finally pulled away. He left, closing the door softly and leaving the room in darkness. Only then did Lily release the breathless sigh she had been holding, her heart hammering violently against her ribs. She lay motionless in the dark, trying to process what had just happened. Her entire body was trembling with the aftershock of his touch, his scent still surrounding her. Chicago glittered like a spilled box of jewels below their hotel suite, but Lily barely noticed the view. She stood before the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at her. The midnight blue gown that Maria had insisted on packing had transformed her from a small-town waitress into a sophisticated socialite. The silk clung to her curves, and the simple, elegant cut made her look poised and confident. "Ready?" Daniel's voice came from behind her. "We can't be late." He stopped mid-sentence as she turned to face him. His eyes traveled slowly from her face to her feet and back up again, his expression one of pure, unguarded astonishment. "You look—" He trailed off, clearly struggling for words. Stunning. In his perfectly tailored tuxedo, he looked like he had stepped off the cover of a magazine, all sharp angles and dangerous elegance. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, surprised at how steady her voice sounded, despite the way his gaze made her skin tingle. The charity gala was a world Lily had only ever seen in movies. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over women dripping in diamonds, and men who commanded boardrooms. Daniel moved through it all with a practiced ease, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back as he introduced her to his colleagues. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my wife, Lily," he said to a group of surgeons and their spouses. They greeted her warmly, and soon Lily found herself in a deep conversation with several of the female doctors about her literacy work with underprivileged children. At first, Lily felt shy, acutely aware of the social chasm between her and these accomplished women. But as they showed genuine interest in her volunteer teaching, asking thoughtful questions about her methods and the children she helped, her confidence grew. She began to speak more animatedly, her passion for the subject evident. Daniel had moved away to speak with some colleagues, but he found himself unable to concentrate. His attention kept drifting back to Lily, the way she gestured with her hands when she spoke, her intelligent observations, the way she unconsciously tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she was nervous. He was genuinely impressed by her grace and intelligence. "Ah, how lovely to see a newlywed couple," Dr. Margaret Hartwell, a respected physician in her 50s, said as she approached Lily with a warm smile. "It reminds me of when I married my late George." Lily looked confused for a moment. She had almost forgotten that she and Daniel were supposed to be a couple, even if it was just for show. Margaret, noticing Lily's perplexed expression, laughed gently. "I'm referring to Daniel, my dear. It seems you've truly captured his heart. We haven't seen him this animated in a long time. He hasn't taken his eyes off you all night." She gestured toward Daniel, and Lily followed her gaze to find him watching her from across the room with undisguised admiration and desire. When he realized she was looking back, he quickly averted his eyes as if he'd been caught doing something wrong. Lily felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "Don't be embarrassed, dear," Margaret said with a mischievous chuckle. "We're all adults here. We know what Dr. Langford is thinking about doing with you when he gets you home tonight." Lily laughed nervously, her face turning an even deeper shade of red. This was supposed to be business. Could Daniel really be having those kinds of thoughts about her? Or was she going crazy? Her evening took an unpleasant turn when Professor Morrison, a lecherous colleague Daniel despised, cornered her by the bar. He had clearly had too much to drink and began making inappropriate, suggestive comments. Daniel's protective instincts flared instantly. Without creating a scene, he moved to her side with a commanding presence, his arm wrapping around her waist and pulling her firmly against his body. "Professor Morrison," Daniel said, his voice controlled but laced with danger, "I believe you've had enough. I suggest you step away from my wife." Lily felt her stomach ignite with a firestorm of desire. Daniel in full protective alpha male mode, defending his woman, his woody cologne filling her senses. She looked up at him with burning want. This strong, imposing man, his hands on her waist, shielding her as if she belonged to him, made her body tremble. She felt a hot, liquid warmth pool between her legs and realized with a jolt of shock that her body was betraying her completely. She couldn't be near him anymore, feeling his presence, his scent, his heat, without her body revealing how much it burned for him, even as her mind screamed no. "We should go," Daniel whispered to her, his voice a low growl. "Before I do something I'll regret right here." Lily could only nod, unable to speak. In the car on the way back to the hotel, she sat in silence, watching Daniel's hands on the steering wheel. He had removed his jacket and was wearing just his dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong vascular forearms. Lily tried to look away. Her thoughts were straying into dangerous territory. She kept glancing at him, then away, taking deep breaths and staring out the window, trying to control her racing heart. Daniel noticed her strange behavior. "What on earth is wrong with you? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just a little breathless. I got nervous with Professor Morrison acting like that, like some disgusting wolf. All those intense emotions gave me anxiety." It was a lie. Her anxiety was from the desire burning through her for Daniel. "Well, you can relax now," Daniel said gently, because you have me to protect you from any danger. He removed one hand from the steering wheel and placed it on her knee. Not in a lecherous way, but gently, reassuringly. But the simple gesture inflamed Lily even more, and she was practically in combustion. Daniel, her voice faltered. Thank you, but please, don't touch me. Daniel immediately removed his hand and returned it to the wheel. I understand, Lily. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cross any lines. Upon arriving back at the suite, Lily rushed directly to her room, trying to put as much distance between herself and Daniel as possible. A torrential storm broke over Chicago that night, the wind howling, rattling the grand windows of Lily's suite. Sleep was impossible. The crash of thunder and the brilliant, jagged flashes of lightning brought back childhood fears she thought she had long since conquered. Before she could talk herself out of it, she was out of bed, padding down the long, silent corridor toward Daniel's room at the far end of the suite. She wore the same white silk nightgown from the night she'd fallen asleep in the library. She knocked softly on his door. Come in. His voice rumbled from within, low and thick with sleep. She pushed the door open. The only light came from a dim lamp on his nightstand, casting long, dramatic shadows across the room. He was sitting up in bed, shirtless, his hair disheveled. He looked powerful and primal in the stormy, half-lit room. Lily? What is it? He asked, his voice laced with concern. Daniel, I hope you don't think I'm being foolish, but, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I'm scared of this storm, of the thunder. Can I sleep in here tonight? He swung his legs out of bed and stood, moving toward her. When the lamplight hit his bare chest, the defined muscles of his torso and shoulders, Lily felt her knees go weak, but she held her ground. He came to a stop directly in front of her, so close she had to tilt her head back to look at him. He gently placed a hand on her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. You're afraid of the rain? He asked, his voice a low murmur. There was no mockery in his tone, only a quiet, searching intensity. Yes, she whispered. I know it's stupid, but I am. His eyes held hers. You know, he said softly, I've been thinking about the party tonight, the way you acted in the car. And I've figured it out. Figured what out? She asked, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. You're not just afraid of the rain, Lily Parker. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. What are you really so afraid of? She tried to deflect, to hide behind a childhood memory. I suddenly remembered when it used to storm like this. I'd go sleep with my parents. I felt safe. Is that how I make you feel? He pressed, his voice dropping even lower, becoming a hypnotic whisper. Is that why you came here? Do you feel safe with me? Yes. You make me feel safe, she admitted, her gaze dropping to his lips, knowing she could no longer hide how vulnerable she felt near him. But it wasn't a bad feeling. He stepped back then, breaking the spell. He pulled a t-shirt from a chair and slipped it on, as if needing a barrier between them. Lily felt a pang of disappointment. Get comfortable, Mrs. Langford, he said, a small, wry smile playing on his lips. The right side of the bed is mine. She got into the massive bed, lying on the far left side, her back turned to him. It was too much of a temptation to look at him. The space between them felt like a mile-wide chasm. Then, a deafening crash of thunder shook the entire hotel. Lily yelped, and before she even realized what she was doing, she had scrambled across the bed and pressed herself against Daniel's warm, solid body. He reacted instantly, his strong arms wrapping around her, pulling her securely against his chest. She froze, mortified at her own involuntary reaction. But she didn't move away. She couldn't. His heart was beating a rapid, heavy rhythm against her ear. She tilted her head back to look at him and found him already staring down at her, his fingers gently tracing the line of her shoulder, her arm. His eyes were burning. She could see the desire in them, raw and undisguised, and she knew her own eyes reflected the same desperate want. She could smell him, the clean cotton scent of his t-shirt mixed with the intoxicating masculine scent of his aftershave. It filled her senses, making her dizzy. She watched his throat work as he swallowed. She saw the veins standing out on his powerful arms. She felt the deep, shuddering breaths he took. And she knew. He wanted her too, as much as she wanted him. "This is a contract." A small, rational part of her brain screamed. "You can't do this. He's a rich, spoiled man. He'll use you and discard you." She knew she had to stick to the script, to keep her emotions locked away. But her heart, her treacherous, foolish heart, already belonged to him. It felt inevitable. She was going to lean in, she was going to kiss him, she was going to surrender. But just as she was about to close the final inch between them, she whispered, "Daniel, the storm has passed. I'm going back to my room." She saw the flicker of disappointment in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. Just when he thought she would finally give him what he wanted, she had pulled away again. "All right, Lily, good night," he said, his voice strained. She started to slide away, but his hand shot out, his fingers closing gently around her arm. "Lily." He pulled her back, not forcefully, but with an undeniable strength. "I won't do anything," he whispered, his voice a low, rough promise against her ear. "Until you ask me to. I won't do anything until you want to be mine. Until you ask to belong to me." The possessiveness, the raw honesty of his words sent a shiver down her spine. But it also brought her crashing back to reality. "I am not your toy, Mr. Langford." The thorny words should have angered him, but he only looked at her with a strange, knowing sadness. "No," he said, releasing her arm. "You're not." She fled back to her room, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Daniel was already at the head of the dining table when Lily came down for breakfast. The storm had passed, leaving behind a city washed clean and a silence in the penthouse that was heavy and charged. The air between them crackled with the unresolved tension of the night before. Remembering his words, his near confession, Lily deliberately chose a seat far down the long, polished table, putting as much physical distance between them as possible. She couldn't look at him. She busied herself with pouring a glass of orange juice, her hands not quite steady. He watched her for a full 3 minutes, his expression unreadable, like a king observing a rebellious subject from his throne. The silence stretched, becoming a tangible presence in the room. Then, his voice, calm and low, cut through it. "Lily." She looked up, her heart giving a nervous flutter. "Sit next to me." It wasn't a request. It was a quiet, indisputable command. A spark of her old defiance flared. "I'm fine where I am, thank you," she replied, her tone laced with a cool, false politeness. This man was dangerous to her peace of mind, and she needed to keep her distance. He stared at her for another long moment, his gray eyes intense. Then, to her utter astonishment, he pushed his chair back, stood up, and walked the length of the table. He pulled out the chair directly beside her and sat down, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap and the coffee on his breath. She froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Daniel Langford did not move for anyone. "According to proper etiquette," she said, a mischievous, nervous smile playing on her lips as she threw his own words back at him. "You can't just sit anywhere you please." A slow, ironic smile spread across his face. "Those foolish rules don't apply," he said, his voice a low murmur, "when I am your husband." Lily looked at him, and the sheer, unapologetic power radiating from him was breathtaking. It was a message, sent without words. "I am the alpha here. This is my territory, and you are mine." This was no longer the man who had signed a business contract. This was a man who had decided to claim what he considered his, and for men like Daniel, What they considered theirs carried a weight she was only just beginning to understand. She felt a desperate need to change the subject, to steer them back to safer, less complicated waters. "I have a meeting with some of the hospital shareholders today," he said, his tone shifting back to business, though his proximity still felt intensely personal. "But when I get back, I want to discuss something with you." A chill went down her spine. He was too serious, too intense. She had a feeling she knew what he wanted to discuss, and she wasn't ready. "Daniel, could you give me a ride?" she asked quickly, latching onto the first distraction she could think of. "Maria said she needed to go to the market. I wanted to go with her. She's been teaching me so much and—" He interrupted her babbling, but his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Lily, you are not a prisoner here. You can go wherever you wish." He paused. "I'll have my driver take you both. While I'm in my meeting, you can do your shopping." Lily nodded, a wave of relief washing over her. For now, at least, the difficult conversation had been postponed. Daniel sat in the sterile, glass-walled conference room, listening to a senior board member drone on about interest rates and expansion plans. His mind, however, was not on the presentation. It was on Lily, on the fear in her eyes during the storm, on the defiant tilt of her chin at breakfast, on the way she had felt in his arms. His phone vibrated on the table. He glanced down, expecting a message from his assistant. He saw Lily's name, and his heart stopped. He excused himself from the meeting, a sudden, cold dread washing over him. Lily never interrupted him during work. If she was calling, something was wrong. "Daniel!" Her voice was a panicked whisper, laced with terror. "Royce is here. He's following me and Maria. There are 2 other men with him." Ice flooded Daniel's veins. "What? Are you sure?" "Positive," she cried softly. "We were walking, and a black car was driving slowly behind us. Maria suggested we go into the street market. That's when we saw him, Royce, and 2 of his thugs, walking behind us. I don't know what to do, Daniel." She was trying to hold back sobs. She didn't know what Royce wanted. The debt was paid, but she knew it couldn't be anything good. "Where are you right now?" His voice was a low, commanding growl, the boardroom executive replaced by something far more primal. "Still in the market," she whispered. "Is Maria with you?" "Yes." "Stay calm, Lily. I'm coming." His mind was already working, mapping out the streets, calculating response times. Near that market, a little further up the street, there's a restaurant called Romano's. Can you get there safely? "Yes. He can't see us right now, but I can see him searching the stalls." "Good. Go to the restaurant. Don't make a scene. I'm on my way." A fierce, protective rage, hotter than anything he had ever felt, surged through him. He barked an order to his personal security team, not because he was afraid of Royce, but because he was afraid of what he might do to the man if he lost control. Lily and Maria slipped into the restaurant, but they were spotted. Just as they sat down at a small table, Royce and his 2 men entered, their presence sucking the air out of the room. Royce slid into the chair opposite them, his men standing a few feet away, trying to look inconspicuous. "What do you want, Royce?" Lily asked, her voice trembling despite her efforts to sound brave. "The debt is paid. We owe you nothing." Royce leered at her, his eyes slimy and possessive. He looked, Daniel thought with a flash of disgust, like a pig sizing up a meal. "Ask your maid to leave, sweetheart," he said with a false, oily charm. "This conversation is between us." Before Lily could answer, Maria spoke, her voice shaking but full of fire. "I'm not going anywhere, you disgusting worm. Where Lily goes, I go." Royce's eyes narrowed. "Watch your mouth, old woman." He caught himself, his greasy smile returning. "Whatever. Lily, my dear, in the world of men, things work differently, if you catch my meaning." Lily stared at him, horrified. "My deal with your father was never about the money," Royce continued. "From the beginning, I told him exactly what I wanted as payment. The old drunk must have gotten confused somewhere along the line. What did you ask my father for? She whispered, a wave of nausea rising in her throat. Darling, don't play innocent. I've been watching you for a long time, Lily. So young, so beautiful, so clean. Not like the women I usually associate with. If you try anything, I'll scream, Lily threatened, her hand closing around a heavy salt shaker on the table. Now, don't be rude, Royce chuckled, a horrible wet sound. I'm a gentleman. I would never do anything to you here. That's why I'm politely asking you to come with me. There's no other way you're leaving this restaurant. Maria grabbed Lily's arm, her knuckles white with fear. Where are you taking me? Lily demanded. Just as Royce was about to answer, a calm, cold voice cut through the air. She's not going anywhere with you. Daniel slid into the booth beside Royce, his arrival so sudden and silent that Royce flinched. Lily let out a choked sob of pure, unadulterated relief. Daniel took command of the space instantly, his posture imposing, his legs spread slightly in a silent, primal declaration of territory. He draped an arm casually around Royce's thick shoulders, his touch a chilling mockery of friendship. Hello, Royce. How are you? He said, his voice a low, pleasant murmur laced with iron. He signaled a waiter. Whiskey. Neat. The drink appeared almost instantly. Now, Daniel continued, turning his cool gray eyes on the sweating man beside him. Where were you planning on taking my wife? He took a slow sip of the whiskey, the amber liquid a tool to bank the fires of the rage that was threatening to consume him. I'm waiting, Royce, Daniel said again, and this time there was no pleasantry in his voice, no irony. Only the flat, cold tone of a surgeon about to make a final, fatal incision. Where were you taking my woman? Dr. Langford. What a surprise, Royce stammered, his face turning a blotchy red. I heard you were in an important meeting. No meeting is more important than my wife, Royce. It's important that you understand that, Daniel said, taking another deliberate sip. Royce seemed to shrink in his seat, the blustering predator suddenly reduced to the cornered rat he was. Lily had stopped crying. She was staring at her husband with wide, astonished eyes. She had never seen this side of him, this dangerous, powerful, utterly commanding man. Royce, who had seemed so terrifying moments before, now looked small and insignificant, and she felt a flicker of pity for him, forever thinking he stood a chance against Daniel Langford. Royce, Daniel said, his voice a low, controlled growl. You are touching what is mine, and I don't like it when people touch what is mine. I don't like it when they look at what is mine, or bother what belongs to me. I'm a possessive man. Do you understand? Royce clearly knew this side of Daniel. The fear in his eyes was real. He had let his vile instincts override his common sense, and Daniel was now here to remind him of his mistake. Mr. Langford, I didn't mean to bother your wife. I just came to extend an invitation. Daniel let out a dry, humorless laugh. Really, Royce? Because when I walked through that door, I saw my wife in tears. And it makes me extremely irritated when people make my wife cry, especially people like you. He leaned in, his arm tightening around Royce's neck, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, menacing whisper. Let me explain something to you. My family has been in this city for centuries, and great fortunes like mine aren't built on honest work alone, which means I have a foot on both sides of the coin. I choose to operate on the clean side, Royce, but don't force me to use the other. Mr. Langford, this is all just a misunderstanding. Of course it is, Daniel said smoothly, pulling Royce even closer. So let me clear it up for you, so there are never any misunderstandings again. You are a rat, Royce, and I am the lion. I don't think I need to tell you what happens when the rat gets in the lion's way, especially when he's bothering the lion's mate. He paused, letting the threat settle. You are on my side of town, Royce, and I have contacts on your side of town too. So either way, if you bother me again, if you dare to look at my wife again, if you even think about following her, I will destroy you. Not hurt you, not inconvenience you. I will utterly and completely destroy you. Am I clear? Understood, Royce choked out, his face now the color of a ripe tomato, not from anger, but from sheer abject terror. Who was this man, Lily wondered, who could inspire such fear? She realized then that there were depths to Daniel she knew nothing about, and perhaps it was better not to look too closely. Daniel released him, his demeanor instantly returning to one of cool indifference. He stood up calmly. "The whiskey I drank is on your tab," he said, "to compensate for the unpleasantness you've caused me this afternoon." He turned to Lily, his expression softening as he held out his hand. "Come, darling." She looked at him, a wave of submission washing over her, so powerful it was startling. This time it was stronger than her. She took his hand. "Come on, Maria," she said, her voice a little breathless, and walked out of the restaurant, her hand held securely in her husband's, while Maria followed behind, shaken but also faintly amused. When they arrived back at the penthouse, without thinking, Lily threw her arms around Daniel's neck, burying her face against the solid wall of his chest. She felt him stiffen in surprise for a second before his own arms came around her, holding her close. "Thank you," she whispered against his shirt. "I've never had anyone stand up for me like that." His arms tightened around her. "Get used to it," he said, his voice a rough growl against her hair. "You're mine now. I protect what's mine." The raw possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent a flood of warmth through her veins. She pulled back to look up at him, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "Daniel." He was going to kiss her. She could see it in the way his gaze dropped to her lips, in the way his hands tightened on her waist. Her own lips parted in silent invitation, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then, abruptly, he stepped back, his cool mask sliding back into place. "I should make some calls," he said, his voice once again crisp and professional. "Make sure Royce doesn't cause any more trouble." The moment shattered, leaving Lily feeling cold and confused. "Of course," she managed. I'll let you work." Alone again, she tried to ignore the hollow ache in her chest. This was a business transaction. That's what she had agreed to. So why did his casual rejection hurt so much? But something had changed. She had seen Daniel in full protective mode, fierce, powerful, completely alpha. And that side of him had awakened something in her she didn't know existed. A desire so deep and overwhelming, it terrified her. As she went to her room that night, Lily knew things would never be the same between them. Daniel had shown his claws defending her, and she had liked it. Far more than she should have. Far. Sleep was a stranger to Lily that night. She tossed and turned, the sheets tangling around her legs, her body consumed by a restless, burning desire. The image of Daniel confronting Royce replayed in her mind on a relentless loop. The cold fury in his eyes, the protective arm around her waist, the raw power in his voice. "You're mine now. I protect what's mine." The words echoed in her soul, stealing her peace. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, she got up and went to take a cold shower, hoping the shock of the water would calm the storm inside her. Daniel, meanwhile, was also awake. He had made his calls, ensuring Royce would become a non-issue, but his mind was not on business. It was on Lily, on the terror in her eyes at the restaurant, and the way she had melted against him afterward. He walked down the silent corridor toward her room, intending to check on her, to say something. He wasn't even sure what. He found her door slightly ajar and heard the sound of the shower running. He stopped, his hand raised to knock, when a thought, sharp and unwelcome, pierced his composure. He could just walk in. He was her husband. He had the right. He took a step forward, then recoiled, as if burned, disgusted with himself. "Daniel, you idiot." he muttered under his breath. What kind of sick pervert have you become? The truth was, he was losing control. Since their wedding, he hadn't touched another woman. The arrangement had been clear. He would seek his pleasures elsewhere. But his relationship with Lily had become a tangled, unexpected thing. He wanted her, and only her. But he was terrified of her reaction if he admitted it. Would she see it as a violation of their contract? Would she throw it back in his face? He couldn't risk it. He turned to leave. Daniel? He froze. Lily stood in the doorway of her room, wrapped in a fluffy white towel, her wet hair clinging to her face and neck. Water droplets traced paths down her skin. In the dim hallway light, she looked ethereal, unreal. Daniel stared, his mouth suddenly dry. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice soft. He looked at her, at the way the towel clung to her curves, at the water glistening on her collarbone, and his carefully constructed control shattered. Earlier, he said, his voice hoarse as he took a step toward her. I said I wanted to talk to you. Yes, I remember, she said, her eyes watchful. I'm listening. He shook his head, trying to clear it. Could you get dressed first? I'm sorry, I can't concentrate like this. A small, knowing smile touched her lips. Of course, Daniel. Give me a minute. When she returned, he was sitting on the edge of her bed, his head in his hands. She was wearing a simple black silk nightgown, its thin straps accentuating the graceful line of her shoulders. The sight of her, so effortlessly beautiful, was another blow to his crumbling defenses. He stood up, a man of nearly 6 feet towering over her, yet he had never felt so vulnerable. So? She prompted gently. What did you want to say? Lily, he began, his voice strained. I know this was supposed to be just a contract, a business deal, but things have changed between us. Changed? She asked, feigning innocence. Yes, more than I ever expected. He took a breath, forcing the words out. When we made this deal, I told you I would still go to clubs when I felt the need, and that you shouldn't be bothered by it. I remember, she said, her stomach twisting into a knot. He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. I haven't been. Not once, he confessed, his gaze intense. Since we were married, I haven't been with another woman. Why are you telling me this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because I know you saw the message from Amanda on my laptop, he said, his voice quiet but firm. She was caught. A flush of shame crept up her neck. How did you know? My laptop has a security feature. It takes a screenshot with the webcam of anyone who snoops, he said, taking another step closer. Daniel. Lily. His voice was a raw whisper now. He reached out, his hands cupping the back of her neck, his forehead pressing against hers. I told you I would never touch you unless you asked me to. His thumbs stroked the sensitive skin behind her ears. But I'm a man, Lily. You must have noticed how sharp my masculine instincts are. His speech was almost a prayer. She knew it was true. She remembered his ferocity with Royce, the possessive way he held her. The man radiated a raw, potent testosterone. I just miss the human warmth, he continued, his eyes closed, waking up with a woman beside me. But I don't want just any woman. I want you. He let out a shuddering breath. I just need you to tell me. Tell me you feel the same. If you tell me you want me as much as I want you, I will wait for you for as long as it takes. I just need to know I won't be waiting forever. His confession, so raw and vulnerable, pierced her heart. This powerful, imposing man was laying his soul bare for her, but her fear, the deep-seated fear of being just another conquest for a rich man, was a cold, hard wall. What happens if I say no? She whispered. You'll break my heart, he said simply. But I'll respect your choice. I don't want you in pieces, Lily. I want all of you. Daniel, please, don't ask this of me, she pleaded, gently pulling away, the hypnotic spell breaking. I can't. We can't. We can't mix feelings into this. Why not? He asked, the frustration finally breaking through his control. Because you would never have even looked at me if you hadn't bought me. The words flew out of her mouth, sharp and cruel as a whip. She regretted them instantly, but it was too late. The vulnerability in his eyes vanished, replaced by a familiar, cold mask. So that's how you see this, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. That's how you see me, as some shallow, selfish man buying toys for his collection. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed. I see. In that case, good night, Mrs. Langford. Daniel, no, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. But he was already gone, the door closing softly behind him. Lily collapsed onto her bed, sobs racking her body. 15 minutes later, she heard the roar of his car's engine starting in the garage below. He was leaving. Was he going to her? To Amanda? The thought was a physical pain, tearing her apart from the inside. Suddenly, there was a frantic knocking on her door. Miss, are you all right? Please, Maria, go away, Lily cried. Maria entered anyway, her face etched with concern, and gathered the weeping girl into her arms. Lily clung to her, her grief pouring out in a torrent. She wasn't just crying for Daniel. She was crying for her mother, for her father, for a life that had been a constant, relentless struggle. She had always been in survival mode, never knowing peace, always waiting for the next disaster. Daniel had been the first person to ever make her feel safe, protected. And she had just pushed him away. She had pushed him into the arms of another woman. Lily eventually cried herself to sleep in Maria's comforting embrace. The next morning, she awoke in her own bed, the sheets cold, her heart a heavy, aching stone in her chest. She went downstairs for breakfast, a sense of dread hanging over her. Maria, I woke up a little late today, she began, already knowing the answer. Has Dr. Langford had his breakfast yet? Maria wouldn't meet her eyes. Mrs. Langford, he didn't come home last night, did he? Lily's voice was flat, brittle. He's still not back. I'm so sorry, miss, Maria said, her own eyes full of a sad pity. Let's think positive. Maybe his car broke down somewhere, or perhaps... A dry, humorless laugh escaped Lily's lips. Maria, she said, her voice gentle despite the pain, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. Thank you for trying to cheer me up, but we both know where Daniel is. He's in the arms of another woman. The words tasted like poison. She paused, a new, hard resolve settling over her. Maria, help me pack my bags. I'm leaving today. I will not stay here and let Mr. Langford humiliate me any further. But miss, you can't just... Maria, please, Lily interrupted, her voice firm but broken. I can't stay. Not like this. Not after... this. Seeing the unshakable determination mixed with devastating pain in Lily's eyes, Maria knew there were no words that could change her mind. Lily packed her single, small suitcase, the one she had arrived with. She left behind all the expensive clothes, the jewelry, the life that had been loaned to her. She would leave with only what was hers. On Daniel's perfectly made bed, she left a note. Daniel, I appreciate all the help you have given me and everything you have done for me, but I believe this charade can no longer continue, for obvious reasons. As for my part of the contract, I am aware of the penalty for breaking it. I will try to get a loan from the bank today to pay back everything I owe. Thank you. Signed, Lily Parker. Maria watched with a broken heart as Lily walked toward the front door, her back straight, her dignity a fragile shield. She wanted to call Daniel, to warn him, to stop him from making the biggest mistake of his life. But Lily had made her promise. Promise me, Maria, Lily had said, her hands gripping the older woman's. Promise you won't call him. I don't want to be found. Not this way. Not because he feels obligated or guilty. And so, Lily Parker walked out of the Langford mansion the same way she had come in, with a small suitcase and a heavy heart. But this time she wasn't being sold. This time she was choosing her own dignity, even if it meant leaving behind the only man who had ever made her heart beat so fiercely. The taxi pulled away down the long gravel drive. Maria stood in the doorway, watching until the car disappeared completely. She turned back inside, her gaze falling on the telephone on the wall. She had promised not to call. But what if Dr. Langford came back too late? What if, by the time he finally realized what he had lost, Lily was gone forever? She reached for the phone, her fingers trembling over the numbers. Then, remembering the desperate plea in Lily's eyes, she slowly, painfully, placed the receiver back in its cradle. Some promises, she knew, were too sacred to break, even when your heart was screaming that you were making a terrible mistake. 3 days later, the Langford mansion felt like a tomb. Daniel was a ghost within its walls, moving from room to room, the silence amplifying the ache in his chest. He was short-tempered, rude, and utterly miserable. How could he be kind to anyone else when there was a spear lodged in his own heart? "Mr. Langford," Maria's voice cut through his dark thoughts. "Telephone for you." "Is it Lily?" he asked, his head snapping up from his untouched breakfast, a wild, desperate hope flaring in his chest. "No, but—" "Then tell them I'm dead," he interrupted harshly. "It's Detective Sanders, sir. Your friend," Maria pressed, her voice firm. "He said he's found her." Daniel was on his feet in an instant, the chair scraping violently against the marble floor. His life depended on this. A dry, ironic laugh escaped his lips when Sanders told him where she was. Of course. The most obvious place. His old house, the one Benjamin had left behind when he'd been admitted to Daniel's clinic. It was raining hard when he arrived, a relentless downpour that matched the storm in his soul. He pounded on the door, not caring about the water soaking his expensive suit. Lily opened it, her face pale, her eyes wide with a defensive apprehension. "Daniel? What are you doing here?" she said, her voice tight. "I don't have anything of yours. I left a note. I'll pay you back for breaking the contract. You don't need to—" He didn't let her finish. He surged forward, crossing the threshold like a lion reclaiming his territory, his hands tangling in her hair, his mouth crashing down on hers in a desperate, punishing kiss. It was a kiss of anger, of relief, of 3 days of agonizing regret. Lily was caught completely off guard, the shock of it, the sheer force of him, making her knees weak. Then the pain and betrayal of the last few days rose up, and she began to push against his hard chest, tears of anger and confusion streaming down her face. "Let me go," she cried, her voice muffled against his lips. "Get out of my house!" But this time, Daniel knew exactly what he was doing. He broke the kiss, but didn't release her. He held her face between his hands, forcing her to look at him, his forehead pressed against hers. "Lily, listen to me," he said, his voice a low, rough growl. "I didn't sleep with Amanda." "What?" she whispered, her struggles ceasing, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I told you I wanted you to say you felt the same," he said, his voice calmer now but still intense. "And if you did, I would wait. But you said no. So why would I go to her?" Because you left," she stammered, the logic of her own heartbreak unraveling. "Because she's not you," he said, the words a raw, simple truth. "She's not stubborn and kind and selfless. She doesn't break my rules of etiquette or disobey my orders. She doesn't come running to my room in the middle of the night because she's afraid of thunder." Lily let out a choked sob, a sound of dawning, painful hope. He hadn't betrayed her. "I love you, Lily," he said, the words finally free, unburdened by pride or fear. "I went to a hotel that night to cool my head. I couldn't face you. I couldn't face how stupid you made me feel, knowing that a man as rational as me was completely, utterly surrendered to you. I came back to tell you that, but all I found was your note." "Daniel," she breathed, her anger melting away, leaving only a vast, aching love. "I want to." His breath hitched. What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling, half expecting her to tell him she wanted him to leave. "I want you," she whispered, rising on her toes to press a soft, fleeting kiss to his lips. "I want you to make love to me." He felt his entire body tremble at her words. The woman he desired more than anything was finally, truly asking for him. "I want you now," she said, her voice gaining strength, her own desperation matching his as she kissed him again, harder this time. "I want you right here." That was all it took. His hands found the hem of her simple dress, his fingers trembling slightly as he slowly pushed the fabric up, his lips tracing a fiery path down her neck. Lily's breath caught, her head falling back as a low moan escaped her lips. Every nerve ending in her body came alive under his touch. "Are you sure?" he whispered against her ear, his voice hoarse with a desire he was barely holding in check, still giving her one last chance to retreat. "I have never," she breathed, her hands working frantically at the buttons of his soaked shirt, "been more sure of anything in my life." The shirt fell to the floor. He was beautiful, powerful, and in that moment, he was completely hers. "Lily," he said her name like a prayer as his hands traced the curve of her waist, the swell of her hips. "I have dreamed of this, of you, every night since that first day." He lifted her easily into his arms and carried her to the old, worn sofa. He laid her down gently, his body covering hers, his lips claiming her mouth in a kiss that was both tender and ravenous. "I love you," he breathed against her ear as they moved together, their bodies finding a rhythm as natural as the rain beating against the windows. "I love you, Lily. Only you." "I love you too," she whispered back, clinging to him, her surrender absolute and complete. 3 months later, Lily stood in her bedroom, adjusting the simple, elegant, emerald green dress Daniel had chosen for her. From the garden below, she could hear the soft strains of a string quartet and the low murmur of voices. Daniel had been mysterious all week, planning what he called a small get-together. "Are you ready, Mrs. Langford?" She turned. Daniel stood in the doorway, devastatingly handsome in a navy blue suit that made his eyes seem even more piercing. "I still don't understand why you're being so secretive," she said, a smile playing on her lips. "What exactly are we celebrating?" His eyes twinkled with a rare boyish mischief as he offered her his arm. "You'll see." He led her down the grand staircase and out into the garden. Lily gasped. The sprawling lawn had been transformed. Twinkling fairy lights were strung between the ancient oak trees, white roses bloomed in abundance, and a small group of their closest friends were gathered around what looked unmistakably like a wedding altar. "Daniel, what is this?" she breathed. Dr. Margaret Hartwell, looking radiant in a lavender dress, approached them with a warm smile. "Lily, my dear, you look beautiful. Are you ready for your real wedding?" "My what?" Lily turned to Daniel, her heart beginning to pound. He took both of her hands in his expression tender and serious. "Lily, 9 months ago, you became my wife because of circumstances neither of us chose. But today, I want you to marry me because we choose each other, because we love each other." He knelt, right there on the soft grass in front of everyone, and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal the most beautiful ring Lily had ever seen, a stunning square-cut emerald surrounded by a halo of glittering diamonds. "This was my grandmother's ring," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "She told me once to only give it to a woman who could love me for who I am, not for what I have. Lily Parker, will you marry me again, for real this time?" Through a blur of happy tears, Lily could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. He slid the ring onto her finger as the small crowd erupted in applause. The ceremony was simple and perfect. Maria stood beside Lily as her maid of honor, no longer a housekeeper, but the woman who had become like a mother to her. Dr. Hartwell served as one of their witnesses, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. When it was time for their vows, Daniel's voice was strong and clear. Lily, you came into my life when I thought I was beyond saving. You saw past the walls I built around my heart and loved me anyway. You challenged me, you changed me, and you made me want to be the man you deserve. I promise to love you not just for who you are today, but for who you are still becoming. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, and to choose you every single day for the rest of our lives. Lily was crying too hard to speak clearly during her own vows, but the love in her voice was unmistakable as she promised to love Daniel through whatever life might bring. After they were pronounced husband and wife for the second time, Daniel had one more surprise. There's someone here who wants to see you, he said softly, leading her toward the house. A figure stepped out from the shadows of the terrace. Lily's breath caught. Dad? Benjamin Parker looked like a different man. He was healthy, clean-shaven, and his eyes, the same dark eyes as hers, were clear for the first time in years. Hello, sweetheart, he said, his voice cracking. Lily ran to him, throwing her arms around him as they both broke down in tears. I'm so sorry. Benjamin whispered into her hair. So sorry for what I did to you, for the choices I made, for failing you when you needed me most. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you're my father. Lily sobbed against his chest. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Daniel watched from a respectful distance as father and daughter held each other, both of them finally beginning to heal wounds that had festered for far too long. Later that evening, after the guests had gone, Daniel explained. He's been sober for 3 months now, he said as they walked through the lamp-lit garden. He's not ready to live on his own yet, but he's making remarkable progress. He asks about you every day. Thank you, Lily whispered, stopping to look up at him. For saving him. For saving me. For giving us both a second chance. You saved me too, you know, Daniel said softly. You brought me back to life. He discreetly gave them a moment. Dad, Lily began gently, what happened? How did you get sober? Benjamin took a deep breath, his eyes still fixed on the sky. It was Dr. Langford. After he paid off Royce and took on my debts, he didn't just put me in a rehab program. He came to visit me. Every week, without fail, even when I screamed at him, even when I called him every name in the book. His hands trembled as he wiped away a tear. He made me confront what I had done. Not just the gambling debts or the drinking, but what I did to you, Lily. Selling my own daughter as if you were property. Dad, no, let me finish. Benjamin finally looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed. For months, I thought Dr. Langford was just another rich man buying what he wanted. But then he told me something. He said, Benjamin, you didn't sell your daughter to me. You gave me the chance to meet the most extraordinary woman I have ever encountered. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for it. Fresh tears streamed down Lily's face. He loves you, Lily, truly. And seeing how he takes care of you, how he looks at you. Benjamin took his daughter's hand. I finally understood what real love looks like. And it made me want to be a better man, a father you could be proud of. I am proud of you, Lily said, squeezing his hand. You're here. You're fighting. You're present. That's all I ever wanted. They sat together in a comfortable silence, father and daughter finally beginning to mend the chasm that addiction and despair had carved between them. 6 months later. It was a quiet Saturday, the kind of ordinary, peaceful day that Lily once never thought she would have. She was curled up in the window seat of the library, lost in a novel, the afternoon sun warming her skin. "Lily?" Daniel's voice pulled her from the pages. "Yes?" "There's something I forgot to ask you." She raised an eyebrow, a playful smile on her lips. "After 2 weddings, you forgot something?" He smiled back, but she could see a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking her free hand in his. Would you want to have children someday?" Lily's heart warmed. It was a topic they had carefully avoided, both of them still healing from their own pasts, still learning how to be husband and wife in the truest sense. "Would you?" she asked softly. Daniel set aside his medical notes and took her face in his hands. "I would," he said, his voice full of a quiet, profound sincerity. "Someday, when we're ready. I want to build a family with you, Lily, a real one. The kind of family we both deserved but never had." Lily set her book aside and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Then we'll build one," she whispered. "Together. A family built on choice, not on obligation. On love, not on desperation." "When you're ready," he promised. "When we're ready," she corrected, and kissed him. In that moment, with the sunlight streaming through the library windows and their future stretching out before them like a blank page waiting to be written, Daniel and Lily Langford understood the deepest truth of their journey. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin in charmed circumstances. They begin in the darkest of places. Sometimes you have to be completely broken before you can be rebuilt into something stronger. And sometimes, love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about 2 imperfect people choosing to build something beautiful together. Their story had started with a desperate father, a daughter sold, and a man buying a wife. But it had transformed into something none of them could have ever predicted. True love, genuine forgiveness, and the promise of a future they would choose together every single day. What did you think of Lily and Daniel's journey? From a business transaction to a love that transformed them both? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about love, redemption, and the power of choosing each other every single day. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.